Morning, Tim.
Hello, Cleona.
So excited for this conversation and for viewers of whoever watches this to understand about money work and how it can help them in their relationship with money. Before we start, I just want to say a little bit about how we met. I met you through doing one of your workshops. I was very much a seeker on the money path and life path and trying to understand different ways of finding freedom in my own relationship with money. And that workshop that I attended with you in London quite a few years ago, I think 6 or 7 years ago, was mind blowing and literally shifted so much stuff for me.
Well,
I found shame, I found projections. Anyway, could you please introduce yourself and then we'll talk a lot about money work?
sure. So professionally, I always say I'm a coach, I'm a facilitator, and I'm an organizational psychologist. So my training is about, if you like, the psychology of people in their work, in their organizations. And as you know, in the money work, that extends to choices we make in our life about what's really meaningful. And then the other strand I've always had in my work is I've always used those in service of individuals or organizations who are trying to rethink really the way we do business and organization to respond to the kind of climate, ecological, and also social justice issues. So I'm always interested in working with people around changing themselves, their organizations, their leadership in service of really creating something that works better. We could discuss what that might mean better. But it's not business as usual. I've never been particularly interested in that. And then the third strand, which sort of sits behind everything I do, I don't necessarily advertise it as such or deliver it as such, but you and I were talking before we started recording. I've had a long-standing Buddhist meditation practice for 25 years, and a lot of those ideas inform my work in what I broadly call a transpersonal approach. So simply put, that means that whenever we're talking about, whether it's me or a relationship issue at work with my manager or the organization or indeed the whole economy, we're never just talking about the stuff that we're seeing. There's always a sort of much bigger, slightly more mysterious picture going on there. And I find helping people find their way of connecting to what that might mean in that story is often very helpful for actually making practical changes. It kind of widens our view. And I guess all of those things, I name them because, as you know, in the money work, all of those things sort of are in the field of the money work when we do the workshop.
Mm-hmm. And then I also want to add that your meditation practice, from what I see in your facilitation, really helps because we stay connected. We stay quite slow, connected to the body. And there's a spaciousness in your facilitation, which is quite important, not a pushiness, which I have seen sometimes when the facilitator might be attached to an agenda that they have, then it doesn't leave as much for the participant. And I think it's very important for the money work to feel safe, for me to have full choice in how far I want to go.
I mean, it's nice to hear. And I do think it's important. Maybe we'll get into why later, but I think there's two quick things I'd say. One is just realizing, I don't know what's going on most of the time helps you not push. You respect the process. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit more than that. A lot of the trainings and approaches I use, both meditation and many other things, are really about including all parts of us, including everything. And so that creates a space if we get lost or if we want to go this way or that way. I always think they've all got an intelligence. They've all got something to tell us. So I hope that makes it spacious for people.
Mm. That is very precious because not all parts of us are always welcome in many places, is my experience. And so, it's very precious to have spaces where all parts feel welcome. So what is money work?
Well, money work in the way I do it and we're talking about it originated from a person called Peter Koenig. He's been doing this work, I would say 30, maybe 40 years now, and he's kind of evolved it in different directions. But its starting point really is the question of, the question we begin with is, why is it that so many of us in our lives, and also so many groups or organizations or, larger systems, we make these plans. We say, well, we want to do this, we want to do that. This is my purpose, or this is fun, or this is the direction we're going, or this is the dream. And then we sort of don't do it, or we do it a bit, or we do it a bit slow, or we postpone it, or we don't just do or move towards the stuff we really want to. And very, very, very often when you ask someone why, it's something to do with money. Something to do with money. A fear, a hope, a judgment, an insecurity. And so that's where the money work began, when Peter sort of began to explore it. And he's come up with a system that I've then trained in, and that's the workshop I've run. And now I add my own kind of insights to it. But the money work really is a system of bringing awareness and really investigating two questions. Question one, what is it about money, or we should reframe it, what is it about my story about money that's getting in the way? And very, very often our stories about money, we don't think of stories, we just think that's the way it is. So what is it about how I'm thinking about money or my belief system that somehow gets in the way of what I want? And then the second thing is, once I've discovered that, there's a process which I think we probably won't go into in this conversation, but I know you know, where I use that to kind of reconnect with, you might say, different parts of myself or different possibilities in my life that I've been blind to, or I didn't see because it was all somehow tangled up in a funny story about money. So maybe later on we'll give some examples about how that might work for people in their lives.
Yeah, examples would be great.
Mm.
Why is money such a big problem for so many of us, do you think?
Well, within this, so the first thing we must say is there is a money system out there. There is an apparent reality, and nothing that you or I are going to say today or in a workshop takes away from the fact that, there are material problems, there is financial poverty, and that's a real problem. So when I talk about the psychology and the consciousness and what's really making the problem, I'm not blind to that, but we're just looking at those things in a different way. But really the problem, including why is poverty created in the first place, right? Why do some people go without when others have more than they could imagine? The real problem is all of us, whether we have money or no money, or like money or hate money, all of us are largely completely unconscious of the belief system and the emotions that money triggers for us and brings up. And because money is so powerful, money is a very highly charged kind of almost magical thing. You take out a big pile of notes in a pub and everyone's going, ah! Whereas if you took a load of paper out, no one's going to be interested. So money is very powerful. And in money, each of us, according to our own story and our own nature and our own upbringing, have kind of buried or tangled up all sorts of ideas and beliefs. And then if we don't know that's what we're doing, which most of us don't, that then pushes us through our lives to, try and get money the whole time, or avoid money, or, think money means this, that, or the other. And so from the lens of the money work, you can see all sorts of blocks and obstacles in people's lives and in groups and indeed whole nations that are to do with weird ideas about money that don't make any sense at all once you start looking. They're largely ridiculous, but we believe them very strongly. So that's the problem.
So what are these wrong ways, ridiculous ways we think about money? Could you give a few examples?
Yeah, well, I can. So I'll do something I often do in the workshop. So everybody's story with money is unique. So anyone watching this, I'm going to be giving some examples. Some might resonate a bit with you, but everyone has a fine tuning of theirs. But, a very common, very, very common idea would be, I don't know, maybe there's something I want to do. Very common thing on the workshop. People have some dream of what they really want to do in their work. And they know they want to do it because in some cases this is a desire they've had really since a child. It's not that unusual. Or they know they love this thing. They know this is what they want to be spending their time with. And they're not doing it. And you say, well, why not? And often it's something to do with the future and security. That would be a very typical thing. So what they're thinking when you break that down is, well, I need money, brackets, a pension or savings or investments, or to have paid off enough of the mortgage. Then I'll feel secure. Then I'll kind of feel okay. I'll feel secure or safe or substantial enough. And then when I feel like that, then I get to do this thing. Yeah. So, and lots of people go, well, of course, that makes sense. But then you look at money, here's some money, different things, and you look at money, or you look at a number on a screen or a little bit of computer information, and you see that this feeling of security in this case, this feeling of being safe and secure to go and do what I want, isn't in the money. It can't be in the money. But we believe very, very strongly it is in a certain number. When I have this number, that number, then I will feel safe or secure or free or successful. So the fundamental problem is that we tie up human experiences of feeling free, being able to take a risk, feeling powerful in the world. And then we don't maybe feel that, we're not connected with that psychologically. And then we say, oh, that's money's fault. When I have money, I'll feel like that. And it's just wrong. It's not true. And you can quite quickly see that it's not true, actually.
So what is the source of these unhelpful ideas about money?
Well, again, we go in quite deep in the workshop about this, but broadly, you could think that there are two main sources of this wrong thinking, and they interact. So number one is we all receive, these ideas in our childhood. Some of them are directly about money. So often on workshops, people realize, oh yes, dad and mum always said it was going to be okay. But I remember as a child, I felt a great anxiety about money. So they might absorb stuff about, if there's no money, I won't be safe. Or it can even be ancestral. I've often had people in my workshops come and they say, it's crazy. I'm really successful professional person. I have loads of money, but I can't stop working to earn money. I feel really scared. I feel if I stop earning, like I might die. And then you can maybe realize even 2 generations back, that may have actually been true, depending on, where maybe with their ancestry, different countries, different conditions. So I've worked with people who's very wealthy guy whose grandparents were in an Irish potato famine. So very strong. So we have direct messages, but we also have messages, all of us as children, about parts of ourselves that we need to kind of put away. So maybe you can't be too loud, or can't be too aggressive, or you have to always be smart, never stupid. So it's like what you and I were saying in the introduction. The parts of us that didn't really get accepted, didn't have space as a child, we often tie up with money in curious ways. So an example would be, let's say I grew up in a family where I always needed to be smart. We didn't do stupid, and the stupid was bad, smart was good. Then I might, stupid, maybe I do stupid things with money. My stupid bits get kind of expressed. Or maybe I'm constantly worried with money that I must always be smart with money. I must always be smart. So I never spend my money on doing something crazy and fun, because that would be stupid. So it's an example. But parts of ourselves that we never got to express consciously get tied up with money. But then we think it's normal. So someone like that won't say, oh yeah, I really don't like to feel stupid, so I wouldn't take a risk. They'll go, it would be stupid for me to spend all my money on this fantastic holiday. Even though they really want the holiday and they can afford it. So that's one area. I hope it's making some sense. I'm giving these examples. But the other area, of course, is because all of us individually are driven by these largely unconscious and incorrect ideas about money and what it really gives us. Then we have a whole society advertising, news programs, education programs, careers advice, all of this stuff that repeats a full story about money and life. So, many people, I'm sure people watching this, as a kid, I wanted to be a dancer, but, I loved dance. I was so happy when I danced, but I didn't become a dancer because, mum and dad said there's no money in it or no career. So that sounds like you're getting sensible, loving advice, but really what you're being told is, the world is not a place where it's safe enough for you to do what you love. Go forget that, bury that, and do something sensible, because it won't be whatever, safe or successful. So there are many, many messages, even that, this is a personal bugbear, but schools now, as you know, are starting to give financial education, how to open a bank account, how to set a budget. But it's okay, but they're still going to transmit this idea that, with money comes all the human experience that you really want. And without money, you can't be free, you can't be courageous, etc. So we're all a bit confused, really. That's the truth of it. And it's very, very powerful illusion, very powerful.
And at the same time, money is kind of important. We have bills to pay, and we choose to live, I don't know, in houses with mortgages. So, like for someone who's viewing, who says, "Oh, are they saying if I can be free without money and I can be safe without money, then that's not my reality."
No, I
What would you say
understand.
to that?
Yeah, no. First of all, I'd say I understand totally. Second, I wish we had 2 days on the podcast rather than an hour.
Yeah.
Thirdly is, it's but it is an important point. It's what I said at the beginning. We don't ignore the fact that there are material and structural problems. Mm-hmm. The real question is what's creating them and what's keeping them going. Because it's not that there isn't enough money. It's not that we couldn't distribute things differently. It's not that we couldn't rewrite all of these rules. So you have to ask, what's keeping this completely, unfair, dysfunctional, damaging system in place? Then you have to look into a deeper question. And often what we have to do, and particularly in a short conversation, again, at the beginning, I said I'm often working on the practical level and a sort of a bigger picture level. And we have to work with both. Mm-hmm. So I would say you're right. Money is important, and people do seem at the moment to need it for these things because we're all believing broadly the same money story, which keeps us on this hamster wheel, which for most people doesn't work so well, and for a few people works well. I was going to say it works well. It gives them bigger numbers, but it doesn't actually necessarily make them happier or more powerful or more secure. This is also one of the things we see on the workshop and this is one of the beautiful things when you're on a workshop with 12, 15 people, and maybe you feel, wow, I feel trapped and vulnerable because I have no money. And we can explore that and really honor that story. And then after you've shared that, someone next to you might stand up and say, I'm a millionaire and I also feel trapped and vulnerable. And it's like, what? And then we realize that we're talking about, again, human experiences, both the so-called positive, humans want to feel free and powerful and stable and secure. And on the whole, we don't like to feel weak and powerless and vulnerable. But we start to see in the workshop that those experiences are much less connected with money or a number or a particular threshold or even debt than we thought. And until we look into it, we're convinced, well, of course, this is nonsense. If I have this money, I feel secure. Then you meet someone who has 10 times that money and you see they're not secure at all. And then you go, oh. Yeah. Then maybe you meet someone, I'm not generalizing, I'm really not diminishing the practical problem, but then you think maybe there have been people in history with very little money who've experienced themselves as truly powerful and very free and maybe done amazing things in the world. And again, we have to say, is this really in the number deep down? Is that really what's going on? But yeah, it does seem that way for sure.
Yeah. Yes, and I would, whilst you were saying we're talking about this, and it's like talking about dipping your foot in a pool of water. It's easy, well, it's you could describe it, but it's worth people coming on a workshop. And now that workshops are done on Zoom by you or by other people who also offer this work, it's very accessible, isn't it? And I would highly encourage people to experience this, because when you're in a group and you can experience the resonance, it starts to make sense. Whereas when
Yeah.
you say it from this
It
type of
doesn't make,
perspective, it goes
yeah.
in, but only a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's very important that you say that. And you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned at the beginning, in the end, and we can't really go into this, I think, on this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but the understanding that comes in the end is not a new theory. So I'm using words, you're using words. And maybe people like the words, maybe people feel rather it's a load of rubbish. But actually, when the shifts come, it's because we actually connect in our body physically, you might say energetically, and sometimes people suddenly connect with that feeling of a freeness or an expansion or security. Or also maybe the opposite. Maybe people really realize, people who've been chasing money so they'd never feel secure, they have the gift of feeling really in their body, not a new theory, their human vulnerability and their human insecurity. Like any of us could die in any moment. It's true. Any of us could
Yeah.
get a diagnosis, get hit by a car, we're all vulnerable. We're all insecure. And whenever those things happen, your bank account is not really going to help so much. So yes, we use words, and the words can be helpful to change our story about money. But in the end, it's only valuable if people actually make that connection in themselves, and often they do. Yeah, it's lovely when they do.
So,
It's very beautiful, isn't it, when that happens?
yeah, it's really beautiful. And I mean, when one participant has a pop, the others are left wondering, "Ooh, what is this all about?" Because they can see that something has shifted, and then that's also very powerful because it encourages you to want to experience the shift.
Yeah.
Why don't people understand the psychology of money?
Well, that's a big question. I think it's kind of like what I said. I mean, I
Yeah,
think the first thing to say is even bankers, financiers,
yeah,
economists,
advisors.
financial advisors, with a few exceptions. Then that's why it's so great that you came on the workshop and that you and I now connect in these ways. Very, very few people, even who claim to understand money, have any understanding of what we're talking about. So it's always about managing a number, usually maximizing a number, and then believing absolutely that with that number comes, the things that we want, the things human society wants. Why don't they understand it? Well, I think I could talk for hours kind of about the history of ideas and philosophy, but that wouldn't be so interesting. But
Yeah,
simply put, it's a bit like what you said, because our understanding of numbers and theory and this idea of the kind of rational economic person, it's a load of thoughts. And very often this is really disconnected with our actual resonance with life, our actual experience of life. And this is why even the person whose money numbers look beautiful, maybe they have a house or two houses or many numbers, and up here, they go, well, why aren't I happy? Why do I still deep down feel afraid or insecure or limited? It's because there is actually a separation for many of us between a theory, idea, what we're taught at school, the ideas we pick up, and our actual experience. And if I just may use an example of exactly the same thing on a global scale, because as you know, I'm very interested in kind of ecology and climate change, and that's actually how I got into the money work in the first place. We're playing the same game geopolitically. So this disconnect. So, we have scientists tell us for the last 30, 40 years, you really need to sort out this carbon problem because it's going to create catastrophic damage to life. In other words, your economic system, which sort of makes sense up here and seems to be very rational and seems to maximize numbers, is destroying life. I mean, literally destroying species, destroying ecosystems, destroying communities, and it's going to get worse. There's the disconnect. And then all the policymakers, rather than going, well, obviously money is just a bunch of numbers we made up, but life is life. Economic system's just something we kind of made up in the last 100 years or 200 years or whatever, but life's been going on for however many billion years. They don't do that. They go, oh, well, we're not sure we can afford investing the numbers to do this. So the answer to your question is both personally and collectively, we've been hypnotized to focus on a number or some conceptual idea about what that number means, and then we disconnect from what's actually happening, which is life. So what's important is to put life first, really.
To put life first.
Yeah.
As you know, Tim, I'm a nonviolent communication practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said, I heard it with an NVC lens. And Dr. Marshall Rosenberg said that we have domination systems, a few people at the top telling us what is right, what is wrong, and that we're trained to be disconnected from our needs. And needs are really what's alive in us. So what you basically just said, this connection with life, with what's life affirming and not life alienating. And corporations so often focus on money as profit, as the main thing, the big thing, and ignore community, stakeholders, and that's probably contributed to this mess that we're in.
That's exactly right, and it's beautiful. The same idea from somewhere else, and I think what a lot of us do individually, and again the current economic model, it generates endless wants, and it manufactures wants. You see, this is often what marketing does, and then it becomes psychological. Many of us feel a lack because we don't have this, we don't have that, someone else has it, and this keeps the whole wheel going. But a want is not a need, as you know.
Yeah.
And if we can touch at what we really need, firstly, it might surprise us what we need in life. And secondly, those needs often can be satisfied with and without money. So it takes us to a much deeper place. And there's been some very interesting kind of new economists who have worked around this. But Peter's work, for me, is the only one that really gets you to, actually experience that. And then when you do, it's very powerful. It's not a new theory.
So what are the typical problems that people come to a money workshop with?
Well,
I came to you with under-earning issues.
Under-earning.
Like I was ashamed to ask for money. So that's one.
Okay. I'll give some typical. I mean, as I say, everyone's journey is very unique.
Yeah.
But the typical thing, so often there's a lot about security, safety, freedom. I'd like to make this move. I know it's what my heart wants, but I can't do it. So that's often something positive is projected onto money, entangled with money. The other could be, maybe this is a little bit more what you were saying. I under-earn, I avoid money. Some people have come on the workshop, they've even inherited money and they pretend they haven't. It's just sort of sitting somewhere. And that's often because they have a negative entanglement. They think money is maybe an evil, dirty, shameful thing. And so why would they want to go there? So they have to learn that they can be evil and dirty and raise their prices. In other words, they need to again see that quality is in them. I'm trying to think of typical examples. Yeah, I mean, often people, usually the key is people know they want to make some change, some positive change. Direction of work less, move, do something different, maybe spend money they have that they're scared to spend, or maybe in your case, actually start asking for more because they're really good at what they do and they feel there's something wrong there. And they're blocked because, some idea about security, freedom, or the goodness and badness of money. And maybe would it be helpful if I gave a couple of examples of people? Is that useful?
Yes.
I'm thinking about people who've changed. So there was one wonderful person who came fairly recently, very senior in the in a government organisation. Well, I say in the public health service, the National Health Service, and she had this dream to do health work in developing countries through kind of NGOs and charities. And again, it was about, do I have enough and have I saved enough? And we worked through that. And the beautiful thing is, within a month, she had a new job and she was working for some sort of NGO in Africa doing health policy or health work. So that's a sort of change. She'd been thinking about that, I would say, almost her whole career, and certainly accelerating the last 5-10 years. But it needed something in order for her to actually go, you know what, it's okay, I can do this. And the shift that was needed wasn't anything to do with numbers. It wasn't that she reached some new thing or her pension was this. She just realized that she could follow what she wanted with and without the numbers. And the reason I love that story is only later she was in touch with me, this person, and she said, yes, it was on the workshop, but on a day after we'd done some one-to-one work with her. She said, I remember when I was 7, I used to draw pictures of me being like a doctor in Africa.
Wow.
So people have these like life dreams that they say, one day I'll do that, and then they don't quite do it. I've had people, set up really interesting kind of businesses. I've had someone recently, actually quite successful, graphic designer, financial. She's doing good work, fine. But she has this vision that she can't let go of doing a really interesting kind of ecological design studio, kind of based in a farmhouse. It's like she sees it. She's a very visual person. So she loves her work. She's very successful. But there was just a vision that she kept sort of not quite going for yet. And again, in the money workshop, she was able to do it. And I think the connection she had to make was maybe a little bit like your one. It wasn't about security or safety. She had to allow herself to become a capitalist boss and an exploiter and greedy. And of course, when I use those words, I'm not using them with judgment. I'm using them as labels that allow her to go, oh, actually, I could set something up. And it could be big, and then I might employ people and I would have to pay them. Now, all of these things, when you say that in service of a beautiful dream to set up an ecological design studio and be a really inspiring graphic designer, she's very experienced, you go, well, of course you should employ people. And of course it makes sense that you pay them some and you take some to build the studio. It makes sense. But in her mind, she couldn't do it because hiring anyone or investing in property or any of that would make her a greedy capitalist exploiter. So she had a negative view tangled up with money. And that negative view was getting in the way of something that was really a very genuine vision. So all sorts of things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can share one of my own on the last workshop that we did, the last intensive on Zoom on money and the life path, was I got really triggered by somebody being ungrateful. And I think the word I used was unconscious.
Yeah.
And then you pointed out that my business is called Conscious Money.
Yeah.
And that I'm very aligned with conscious and being aware.
Yes.
And I remember the phrase you used was pretend or act as if you're like a mushroom on a log of wood, completely unconscious. And I have to say there's a lot of delight and joy in and lightness in not having to think through and analyze carefully thoughts and decisions and, trying to work out the impact on others and all of those kind of things that just were quite heavy for me. So there's a lot of freedom in being unconscious, which I'm enjoying.
Well, that's right. And you name it beautifully, because I think what people get from the process and the workshop in the end is a sense of freedom or expansiveness or relief. Just that they can express these other parts of who they are, which previously were unavailable. Like, I always have to be conscious, or I always have to be this kind of ethical, totally fair all the time. There's nothing wrong about being conscious or fair. They're great. But if that means you're so identified with being that way that you can never be unconscious or never be the boss, then what you're actually doing is you're letting your ideology, your belief system, stop you moving forward in life. So, yeah, I think this is a nice thing about the work. And it goes back to what we said is, the economic system kind of is a way of thinking. And all of our stories about what we can and can't do with money, I have to be always conscious, I have to always be fair, or I always have to have enough, otherwise I'm not secure. They're stories up here, and our bodies are helping us more connect with life. this kind of deeper intelligence. And to really follow life, we may sometimes need something that will just detonate that story or shift that story. So there's a little bit of a dance that goes on between our thinking and our bodies. But what we say on the workshop is really your body or your intuitive connection with your life path, where you really want to go. That's really the thing to trust as much as you possibly can. That's got actually a much deeper intelligence. As I say, the economic money system really, it feels like it's very real and heavy, but it's just a load of stuff a few humans made up and we keep repeating to ourselves.
When in doubt, trust the life path.
Yeah.
That's something you said.
Yeah, it sounds easy. I mean, I'm still learning every day. It's not easy. You also become very respectful of your own fear, one's own fear and blind spots. I still often I'm thinking, am I doing this because it's really my life path, or is it giving me some identity or security, or So for me, I can't say suddenly all my money stuff goes away, but the difference is it becomes really a path for me of waking up, and I'm more and more able to be honest and aligned. And, I still got to work with my own blocks, just like everyone still has to work with their stuff.
Yeah.
But I think a big shift comes when we stop blaming money or stop thinking the solution is in the money, because then we can be not take responsibility. No, actually, you're talking about some inner decision about who you feel you can and can't be, where you feel you can and can't direct yourself in life. In the end, that is what you're talking about. So just to reframe it that way, and then, okay, you might still feel scared or have old habits that get in the way, but to go, this habit is not going to go away if I have an extra zero or 2 extra zeros or 10 extra zeros, because I'm talking about a belief system I have that stops me.
And when I stop blaming money, then the power is with me, not with money. And I see that as much as I'm not really the doer, and things quite often happen through, I don't know, they just happen. There's also the taking your power back, and not, when you say not blaming money, I can own all of it, and I just feel more, powerful.
Well, and that's right. And one of the very common projections we have in society, very, very common, collectively, is we believe the people with money have the power. I mean, it almost seems like I'm saying a truism. The people with money have power. And then if we believe that, again, we're entangling power with a number, we miss a few things. The worst thing is we miss our potential for power individually, but also collectively, to mobilize, to connect, to move for change, or to create what we want. We just miss that because we think, well, it's the people with the zeros have the money. The other thing is then we expect many of them to be the ones who are going to solve, a lot of the social environmental problems we're in, because we think they've got power. But then, I work with these people and they're just as confused and often as paralyzed as anyone else. So to really realize, wow, we're all humans, we all have power, and also we can all be powerless. This can not just help me, but it can also help me work with different people, whether I think maybe I had an idea this person's powerful, this person's not. If I can see everyone could be powerful, but everyone might also feel powerless, then maybe I relate differently to people.
So we just talked about ecological challenges. What is this link between money and system change or professional change? Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, this is, I wouldn't say it's a new area, but this is how I actually got into it. So very briefly, I used to run actually very kind of quite well-known, famous master's program in good top UK business school. And it was about leadership for responsibility and sustainability. And it was a really wonderful program. It was originally set up by Anita Roddick, who was ahead of her time, the founder of the Body Shop. She was like an activist, feminist, ecologist businesswoman. So she managed to kind of use money in a really interesting way. But anyway, we had workshops on all sorts of global issues, social issues, development, climate, new economics. And we had amazing people come in and talk about this and new policies and new ideas and new systems. But it was only when I met Peter, who was the first person for me who'd really connected all of these policy ideas. We need to change this. We need universal basic income. We need a new way of thinking about GDP. We need to measure carbon. Lots of very clever people, but somehow getting nowhere in a way, or certainly progress is very slow. And he was the one who said, if you don't change the underlying consciousness, if we don't become more aware of what's driving the money system at the psychological depth level, then even if we do put in this new policy and this new money system and crypto, and it will, in the end, it will just replicate the same basic distortion, which is some people will keep trying to chase money because they think they'll get power, security, safety, then I'll keep trying to chase money. And some people will, the money won't come because maybe they think money's evil or part of a problem or for other people. So, that's obviously a very simplistic overview. But the basic insight, which I found to be very true, is yes, we need really clever people out in the world creating alternatives. And yes, we need activists pushing the issue. And we need everybody kind of mobilizing for change. But if we don't understand what's driving us deep down, very often we just create more of the same difficult problem. And you see that in the history of revolutions, and you see that in a lot of activism that's very divided between, we're the good guys, you're the bad guys. You see it, I see it happen everywhere. And, in my life, as you know, I've been a business school professor, I've been a coach, I've been an activist, I was even a politician, I was elected as a Green Party politician. I've tried many different positions to think, how do things change? And more, I think the money work is really one of the keys, really very, very powerful key.
And how is the money work relevant or going to be helpful in resolving these ecological challenges?
Well, I joke on the workshop, I say, because people often say, wow, everyone should do, when they get it, they go, right, everyone should do it. And I always joke, well, I've worked with, a few hundred people on this, and I just got 8.5 billion to go. So, that's an unsatisfactory answer. Mm. I think that people working for change are aware there's a lot of stuckness in the system, a lot of, I don't like to use the word resistance, but it's very hard to change things, right? It's hard to change our economic model. It's hard to get people to buy less stuff. We have a whole global economy that's absolutely driven still on, kind of a take, make, waste model. You take stuff from the planet, you make stuff, you sell it, and then it gets thrown away. It's improving a bit, but we still have this deeply entrenched idea of infinite growth of the economy, more and more stuff, more and more GDP on a finite planet. Mm-hmm. More and more people know it's a completely insane idea. I think people are realizing this, and yet it goes on. So I think one part of the puzzle is not just to say, well, we need new regulation, we need new new policies. They're really important. But most of us humans, certainly in the industrialized nations, this is inside us now. Even though it doesn't really lead to our happiness, and we know that on some level, even though we know it's not really giving us this sense of life, of vitality, we're all more or less driven to maximize numbers and get stuff. It's like we can't quite get off the conveyor belt. We measure ourselves up to other people, and we, do stuff now that we think is destroying our souls, and we're not enjoying for some idea of future pension. And, we're all part of this kind of industrialized mindset. So I've come to believe that each person who can take even one small step saying, I choose life with and without money. Doesn't mean you're against money. Doesn't mean you won't have money. But if push comes to shove, I choose what brings me alive now, what feels whatever good, wholesome, healthy, nourishing, vital. And I will move past the fear of, maybe that means I'm stupid, or I won't have enough, or what will people think? Or I really believe that each step in that direction is not just good for us, and it is good for us because it brings us more life now in the moment, but it also starts to shift the wider social field. And you see this in small ways. Every time someone in my workshop, like this woman I spoke of who's now doing the things she's dreamed of, well, she's got any number of senior colleagues who'll be going, oh, she did it. And that does plant seeds. And there are more and more stories like this happening. So I think we have all internalized a very, very damaging and unbalanced system. And we need to realize the system isn't just out there. It's actually in here. It's what the French kind of philosopher Foucault, he talked about biopower. The most powerful form of kind of keeping things in place is when the power is in our own body. So we stop ourselves doing what we really believe in. We're the ones that carry on doing the jobs we hate because we're scared about what may or may not happen in 20 or 30 years. So every time someone frees themselves up to do that, I think it's a radical act. I mean, you can tell I'm an activist. You can't take the politician and the activist out of me. But people don't have to be interested in that on the workshop. That's also what I want to say. I'm not saying people, you're on a workshop to change the planet.
Yeah.
People come because they really want more of their own life. But sometimes towards the end, if some people are interested, we talk about, well, what would it be like if more and more people did this? And we are starting to find, as you know, because you're a financial advisor, there is a little bit more interest now of banks and financial systems starting to engage with this work now. So, what you tell me, what would happen if every financial advisor really knew this work well? Would anything be different, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, massively. There's a lot of misunderstanding about money and money systems, and the importance of our work. And also, if I think that the biggest service that I can do to my clients is to be clear on my own stuff with money, because then I'm more of a clear guide and I'm not muddied myself, and there is sometimes I'm amazed at what comes out when a client asks me a question, and I can just say that, like, there is a space for wisdom within me that's not coming from me. It sounds very weird, but clients talk to you beyond just money, pensions, investments. They talk to you about their life.
Yeah.
And I think if you can be clear on your stuff, then you can be more of service. So I think it's very important. There's definitely more books from people who work in finance about sustainability, which I'm celebrating. And yes, we can do more. So what advice would you have for anyone already working on change in terms of getting them to look at their own relationship with money?
When you say work on change, do you mean like personal change or in another role?
Yeah, let's go back to personal change.
Well, one of the things Peter says, and I found this to be true, he says you can have done a lot of your own work on yourself, like therapy or meditation, or you can have done a lot of your own inner development, and still money's one of the last things that people really touch into. I found that to be very true, actually. And I've had a number now of very experienced therapists and therapy supervisors come who love the work, and they kind of go, not only, wow, this has kind of added something to my own practice, but, oh yeah, therapists hate talking about money and stuff. So we have some really interesting conversations. So I think what I'm saying is anyone who's already working on change, maybe in their own way, number one is be really willing to lift the taboo on investigating money, because it's one of the things we talk about in the workshop. Money is a taboo because it's very highly charged and largely unconscious. So just being really interested in money is a good step.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, and we often also find this, we have lots of people who come on the workshop who are already doing somewhat alternative things in their life. Maybe they are working as, I don't know, coaches or therapists or creatives or kind of pioneering new ways of doing things. And they come with many ideas about doing something new, but then they do money in the old way. So money is often one of the last things that we can bring with us and do in a new way. It's very interesting. I work with lots of activist groups. They've got the most wonderful ideas for doing business new or teams new or careers new or creativity new, but they still organize money in the way, the accountant tells them to. So be really willing. The advice I'd say is in yourself, be a detective into your own money pattern. Be at least open to the possibility that everything that you think now is a money reality is mirroring back to you your own unconscious biases and prejudices. So you could almost take out a notebook now and say, well, if that were true, what's it telling me? How do I do money? What's it telling me? See if you can bring the same creativity and freedom and the idea of developing to money as you do to other areas of your life. I think that's where I'd start. And the final one I'd say to get started is just start playing with money. Just change your habits with money just to see what happens, because very quickly it will take you to an edge. So if you're normally, let's say you always go into the pub and for some reason you're always the one who buys the drinks because I don't know, you feel awkward not knowing who's going to buy the drink, or you always feel you should, or you want people to think you're generous or whatever. Just keep your wallet in your pocket and just experience what happens. Or if you're someone who finds it very, very hard to make impulse buys, next time you see something you really like, buy it. Don't go through that. But also the opposite. If you're someone who makes loads of impulse buys, just do the opposite. So yeah, just reverse your habits. You can start small and notice the emotion that arises and then be curious. Oh, this is telling me something about some edge, some area that's difficult for me. It can be an amazing path. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember you sharing this story about splitting the bill in workshops and how people can get quite
Yeah.
aggressive about being generous and, snatching the bill to pay, and the waiter's probably just waiting for 2 minutes for this conflict to pan out.
I think waiters are probably used to it. I should talk to waiters, but I'm guessing waiters see all the time lovely evenings, people relax, having fun, then the bill comes, and then very often I'm sure they see it get strange, because that's what money does. Our beliefs around money get in the way. So
I did go once to a birthday drinks when I worked in the bank, and I had just started my business then, and everybody else was, earning well, and they'd ordered a lot of drinks, and I hadn't drunk, and I didn't know everyone there. They weren't like my best friends, so I said I'm not going to pay for the drinks, and one person had such a dramatic reaction, a hissy fit. She was like, oh, and I was just calm. I was like, I'm not paying for it. And I could see, how I'd lost the need for maybe seeking approval or caring about her judgments, it was so clear. So I think it's quite nice to have that, because, before I probably would have felt guilty and,
that's right. And if you
Yeah.
think about those things, that they seem small, but they're not small, and then you realize they're going on all over the world every day, and then you amplify them in different situations, you start to see how all sorts of kind of emotive, slightly crazy, distorted behavior or judgment is being driven by people's ideas about numbers. So yeah, these small examples are very important to see.
Yeah. What books are your favorite books on money that you would recommend to people?
I will recommend books. As you said, I do think trying to experience the work if people are interested
Yeah.
is really the best. Peter Koenig, who runs the most amazing workshops. He's not based in the UK. And he wrote one book, which, I think I tend to recommend it to people after they've been on the workshop. It's very interesting, but there's something about the experience of the workshop. But he wrote a book called 30 Lies About Money. It's not the easiest read, but it's extremely interesting. But I found rereading it after I've done the workshop is very rich. I've always enjoyed a book by an American kind of academic called Jacob Needleman called, I think it's Money and the Meaning of Life, because he writes quite experientially about it. There's a beautiful bit. He does this detective work, right? He starts to get really interested in money, and he tells the story of he's doing a series of seminars about philosophy and money and the meaning of life. But then he meets people in his seminar, and actually the really interesting thing is what he discovers about himself. And at one point, there's a beautiful situation where someone presents him with a briefcase full of gold, literally gold bars. And he writes about what it does to him physiologically. And again, this is when he realized, money isn't some system. He really feels almost like his whole energy system just come ablaze with this gold. It's very powerful writing. So I like what he says. I've always enjoyed Charles Eisenstein. I'm not really up to date with his writing, but Charles Eisenstein went through a phase, certainly when he was writing about kind of the gift economy and what he called sacred economics, and starting to think through what really would be a different way of thinking about economics and exchange in a new world. I think he writes very well. So they're some of my favorites.
And then finally, how would people get in touch with your work? And is there anything that you wanted me to ask you and I haven't asked that you'd like to share?
So people can find me on my website is the best place. It's differentspace.co.uk. We'll put that in the links. You can do -the money work or /the money workshop, or you can just go to the website. So I don't just do money workshops. As I say, I do coaching and facilitation and different workshops, but the money work is core to what I do. So they can find me there. And I'm always really happy to hear from people, even if people have got questions or maybe something I said in this conversation kind of bugs them a little bit, because we don't have loads of time. I'd much rather you got in touch and said, you said this, and what did you mean? Then, please do be in touch. You know me, Claire, and I love talking about this stuff, don't I? Is there anything I wish you'd asked me? Gosh.
We covered quite a bit.
I think so.
We didn't cover the actual process, but I think it's best to leave that to a surprise and to let people discover it when they get to the workshop. So
I think that's right. We've talked around it and we've given the idea. And in fact, that's helpful what you say. So I'm quite deliberate. When I talk about the work, I don't necessarily do the work. And there is a technique, as you know, and that's quite deliberate because I think it needs a bit of pacing and a bit of digesting to do it. So all the stuff I said about, change your habits with money, play, be curious, all of that really is the first step of the money work. The second step that I said, which is then you really find a way to make those qualities that you thought that the power was here, you thought the freedom was here, or maybe you thought that the greed was in the money. The second step, you really find out how that's in you. We've talked about it, we haven't done that, but that is deliberate. Because I think that's kind of more responsible to do it in a safe space with the group. I forgot your question now, but no, we have done a lot, and there's more to talk about. We could talk again sometime, maybe. I'd be very happy to.
Yeah. This was really fun. Thank you so much, Tim, for your time and for sharing so generously about money work, and hopefully more and more people can become aware of money, and maybe we can, shift money systems quickly.
I hope so.
People.
Yeah. Well, it would be great. Actually, one thing I'd like to say, if it's all right, because what I was just thinking was, or maybe sometime maybe we have a session about money work and your industry, and we think a little bit more together about, what would that really mean, if financial advisors had that consciousness. So something I'm becoming more interested in, although I haven't progressed. I think there are a number of areas where I'm starting to get interested in applying the money work. I mean, one is divorce. Having been through a divorce in the last few years myself, it was very interesting to work out the money with my money conscious and really see how emotion and relational patterns play out in money. and I'm happy to say we got it sorted pretty quickly, but that was really very stressful. And I thought, wow, anyone going through some sort of settlement, post-relationship settlement, to do money work around that could be so healing and solve literally years of pain going through courts and stuff. So I'm just putting it out there. Then I was thinking about financial advisor. A sister of a very good friend of mine is currently going through bankruptcy. And so again, I think that's happening to lots of people at the moment, and again, to explore that. So the thing I was going to say is, as well as running the public workshops where anyone comes and you have the pleasure of you don't know who you're sitting next to and they could have any money story, I'm really interested to hear from people. If you think, oh, well, how would this work in my sector or with this issue or with this community? I also work around that, as you know, because we did some work for a particular community.
Yeah, childless women, artists.
Yeah, artists. I've done some for spiritual communities about how do we do money. I'm doing one in the autumn for a group of business founders as well. So, that's a whole growing area. This is part of how it will spread to 8.5 billion people, is if different groups get interested in this, say, wow, what would it be like if we all thought through money together? And it can be very beautiful, as you know, because I think when it's held well, people really reveal things about themselves and connect and see and honor parts of each other that often isn't happening, I think, in a workspace. So maybe there's a whole future conversations we could have about that as well.
Yeah. That was great, Tim. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and I will
pleasure.
leave links for people to connect with you, and hopefully they attend workshops and do this work.
Great. And thank you, Cleona, because I've loved sharing the work with you on the workshops, and you've always been a real supporter of it, and that does mean a lot to me, because as you know, the word gets out through word of mouth. So I'm really happy talking about it with you and sharing it with you. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.